Welcome back. BC's NDP government says the Liberal jobs plan has been a failure for the province. Last month, BC lost more than 11,000 private sector jobs. Mike Farnworth, finance critic for the BC NDP, says these numbers are bad news for families and bad for the Liberal government. Mike joins us now from our BC studio. Mike, thanks for taking time to speak with us.
My pleasure.
Are these jobs numbers a reflection of the summertime doldrums or a more deeper reflection of something else?
I think it's a deeper reflection of something else. The government announced its jobs plan almost 2 years ago with great fanfare and an $11 million advertising budget. And at the time they said, oh look, it's going to take time, it's going to take time. Well, here we are 2 years later and it's been a big bust. As you just stated, last month alone, we're down more than 11,000 private sector jobs. So clearly it's not going in the right direction and it's not working.
Well, what can be done, in your estimation, to remedy the situation in the long term? Because this is a long-term problem we're talking about here.
Absolutely, it's a long-term problem. And I think there's a number of things that the government can and should be doing. One is to stop what we're referring to out here on the West Coast as playing the game, which the Premier likes to do, and actually start governing. And that means looking at some of the different sectors of our economy and addressing some of the issues that are facing them. For example, in the resource sector, there's issues around skills training, there's First Nations issues that need to be dealt with. Approval process in relation to mining, for example, the time for permitting in mining has expanded significantly under this government. That needs to be brought down. On the non-resource side, there's a number of public policy areas that could be dealt with. For example, film and television is important out here. There's issues around that. We've lost a number of large productions. Life sciences has a huge potential here in British Columbia. Yet again, what it requires government to be doing proactive public policy work, and that's not taking place.
Mike, do you think that the situation would be any different with a different government in place? I mean, the climate around the world right now, particularly in North America, is that jobs are getting to be scarcer and scarcer in the current climate. Do you think that that's a factor in all of this?
I mean, certainly, we're not immune from the global economic climate. We're a resource-dependent province. No one argues with that. But there are things that are within provincial jurisdiction that the province could be doing a much better job at. One of them, for example, is skills training, ensuring that as jobs are created and when job opportunities are there, that we're not relying on temporary foreign worker programs, that we've got people here in British Columbia who are trained to fill those jobs. That's a big issue out here. That's an area the government could be working on. Life sciences, as I talked about, in the tech sector, public policy changes are important and are required. Again, that's an area where government could be doing something that's proactive and is able to have results here in the province of British Columbia. And instead, what we're seeing is a lot of taxpayers' money being spent on government advertising around the jobs plan, and more of the game side of politics as opposed to the public policy side.
Mike, there's lots of talk about pipelines in our country right now, particularly Northern Gateway in your part of the world, but also this new west to east project that's been put forth by Energy Canada. How do you see that working in favor of BC, if that's any way in favor of your province? Because let's face it, going west to east means they're taking what could be traffic that would help the BC economy away from BC.
I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for the entire country. And at the end of the day, to me, that's just as important as what's going on here in BC. What's strengthening Canada as a whole? The West to East project seems to have a lot of provincial support. It keeps a natural resource here in Canada, in this case New Brunswick, to be developed. And I think that's good for the country. In terms of British Columbia, there's huge opportunities with LNG, which the government is heavily focused on right now. Yet there's a number of long-term considerations that need to happen before those projects come to fruition. So I think there's a lot of potential in terms of resource development for not just British Columbia, but for the country as a whole. The key is to make sure that we're focused on doing what needs to be done and addressing the issues and concerns that are impacting those particular projects. LNG, for example, we need to have a royalty program in place here in British Columbia before you're going to actually see, real investment and LNG plants built. That's not taken place. That has to happen. First Nations issues have to be dealt with. Environmental issues have to be dealt with. But there's a lot of optimism in that area, and there's a lot of potential for British Columbia and Canada as a whole.
Mike, do you think that in the short term that the situation in terms of jobs will get any better under this government?
Well, if they fail to address some of the key issues around skills training, if they fail to address some of the public policy issues, if they fail to deal in the case of LNG with getting a royalty framework in place, you're not going to see us able to capitalize the way that we should be capitalizing, and you're going to see a jobs plan that will continue to be, in the eyes of most people in this province, a bust.
Last question for you before I let you go, and I appreciate you taking time with us. Do you think the government has a plan that the people can get behind in terms of creating jobs and growing the economy in BC?
Well, the current plan is not one I think people are getting behind. They're now realizing that they were told one thing before an election, and they're finding something completely different after an election. Whether it's skills training, whether it's film and television, there's real challenges. Unemployment amongst young people in this province is very high, and the loss in particular of a lot of part-time jobs this summer does not bode well for young people being able to have jobs to get the money they need to go back to post-secondary school in September. So right now, I think the jobs plan is viewed as a bust.
Mike, I appreciate your candor. Thanks for taking time to speak with us today. I look forward to speaking with you again.
My pleasure.
That's BC NDP finance critic Mike Farnworth, who joined us from our Vancouver studios. Still to come here.